Hi everyone and welcome. This is Eagle News. I'm Ralph Cornell in Washington. It's the first Saturday of December 2023 here in the nation's capital. We begin with this week's top story. A day after Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. attends this year's APEC Summit in San Francisco. He visits the Filipino community in Los Angeles. Here's Alan Basaliaje for the event highlights.
Los Angeles, California plays host to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. after wrapping up his participation in the 30th APEC Summit in San Francisco, California. Just as it was in the northern reaches of the state, Filipinos in Southern California extended a warm reception for the president. And on the part of Marcos, the Philippine leader delivered an inspired address to an estimated 1,200 listeners and shared his thoughts as they pertained to the thriving Filipino diaspora in Los Angeles.
Pass on your love of the Philippines to the next generation and the generations after that. They say home is where the heart is. And when they love their Filipino identity as you do, they will always belong to the Philippines no matter where they might be.
I think it's but proper and right for the president to come here because you will find in America the biggest Filipino diaspora, and this Filipino diaspora, they continue to remain rooted to their Filipino heritage, and what better way to really encourage them to do more in nation building than to have the president really come here to personally make the appeal so that Filipinos will continue supporting our country.
The Filipino American Chambers is focusing on businesses, and there's always a synergy with what the Philippine government is doing and our US counterparts here as being the chamber. We always have our love for our homeland, and if there's any trade that we can contribute, business, and then synergy with that would be great for us. So we're excited to hear what his message are and help our kababayans and vice versa here for all of the immigrants here in the US as well.
What message would you like to give to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.?
That he has to continue his good job right now that he has started. So we will have a more progressive country. We wish him good health and his family so he can continue his work for us.
After engaging with members of the community, Marcos departed, bound for Honolulu, Hawaii, the third and last leg of his week-long U.S. trip. By most accounts, President Marcos Jr.'s stopover here in Los Angeles was a short one. But be that as it may, many were nonetheless happy to hear the president's message, one which he carried with him all the way from their homeland. Alan Basoyahe, Los Angeles, California, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
In a related story, in his address to Filipino community members in Los Angeles, President Marcos Jr. outlines his vision for the country's tourism, technology, and economic growth. Eva Basaliaje speaks with attendees about their take on Marcos Jr.'s message.
As part of his week-long U.S. trip, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. visits Los Angeles, California. We hear from guests who got a chance to listen as the president addressed members of the LA Filipino community.
He spoke about unity, which we need as a country. Although we're outside the Philippines, we still kind of reach out to our countrymen who are left behind.
The remittance that we send to the Philippines, it's actually bringing the Philippines a foundation so that we would be able to help our countrymen.
He mentioned about telecommunication and getting the same access that we Filipinos here enjoy in the US, and not so much in the Philippines. So that is good to know that giving access to all the Filipinos.
He was big on the tourism aspect of the Philippines. He was encouraging people to bring Filipinos to the Philippines because there's so much to see. Also, he was pushing for outreach in other countries. He was saying how Filipinos are recognized in other countries, and other countries want to take in more Filipinos. So that made me really interested in his speech and his mission for his presidency.
The one that's impacted me is the love, actually. It touches my heart because it's more on love and the unity, and it's, the love for the Filipino. And I have to come back and just bring more people in the Philippines.
It's all about representation and awareness and having A presidency that helps promote that is super important, especially because Filipinos are so talented. We're the most hardworking people.
The Filipino president right now and the past president before, they want a solidarity among the Filipino people as well as the world. So we are supporting their advocacy for the Filipino as well as the whole world. President BBM, go, go, go. We love you.
Feedback from attendees was positive. Of note was the president's message to Filipinos at home and abroad to continue the benchmarks of unity and strength. Eva Basayahe, Los Angeles, California, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
In other news, the world watched for more than 2 weeks as crews in northern India struggled to free 41 men trapped in a highway tunnel under construction that collapsed. Last Tuesday, 17 days after the tons of rock and rubble imprisoned the men, rescuers broke through the debris to free them. ThomasILikness has the story.
Tuesday became a time to celebrate as the men emerged from the rocky prison one by one on a wheeled stretcher. Crews had several setbacks as they tried to punch through the rock to install a 57-meter pipe wide enough to bring the men out. In the final stretch, workers had to use hand tools to clear the debris. Before facing the crowds, doctors examined the men at a makeshift facility set up at the tunnel entrance. Then government officials greeted them, draping them with flower garlands. Weary relatives, many who had kept vigil for a couple of weeks, celebrated as the news spread that the men were okay. Waiting ambulances whisked the men away. Helicopters took them to nearby hospitals. During the ordeal, the men had food, water, and oxygen that was sent in through pipes. Doctors, including psychiatrists, monitored their health. Remarkably, no one died or suffered serious injuries. Now that the men are safe, the investigation begins. There have been questions over the safety of the tunnel, which is being built in the Himalayas, and the risks that workers endure while working at high altitudes. Some critics also say the government ignored the risk of landslides. Others ask why the tunnel did not have an emergency escape route. The government says construction will resume in a few months, but most of those who spent more than 2 weeks trapped by the collapse say they have no desire to return to that job. ThomasILikness, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Back here in the US, reports of the mysterious upper respiratory illness affecting dogs has surfaced in multiple areas across the country. Dog owners share with our team how they feel about this disease threatening their beloved furry babies. Jane Kathleen Gregorio reports.
Dog owners beware. A mysterious canine outbreak is on the loose. Recent findings published by the University of New Hampshire's Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory and the Hubbard Center for Genome Studies, an unknown upper respiratory illness affecting dogs across the country could be caused by a new form of bacterial infection that is resistant to standard treatments. Symptoms include a cough that can last for weeks, runny eyes and sneezing, and, in a few instances, even death. Using state-of-the-art techniques, researchers have ruled out viruses, including COVID, as well as any typical fungal or bacterial respiratory pathogens. Evidence thus far has revealed a non-culturable, bacteria-like organism similar to Mycoplasma. This infection has been limited to dogs and at the moment does not appear to target any specific breeds.
And I'm a veterinary pathologist who has worked with infectious diseases and public health for over 20 years. The recent canine respiratory outbreak of unknown disease, it's not responding to antibiotics, so it's something new perhaps, but it's unknown. So sometimes what happens with these type of infections, it's a co-infection. It could be something that's viral initially and then bacteria sets in. So the first thing pet owners should do that can help mitigate the spread is to first make sure that you have all your vaccines up to date on your pet, especially if they're recommended by your veterinarian, like Bordetella or kennel cough. And if your pet is having any signs of upper respiratory disease like coughing, sneezing, nasal discharge, eye discharge, or is heavily lethargic to definitely seek veterinary care. The other thing that pet owners can do is to avoid all contact with other dogs. So limit times of boarding at doggy daycare, or you can hire a pet sitter or a dog walker. Those would be my recommendations.
We recently spoke to some dog parents from different parts of the country who shared the lengths that they go through to make sure their canine companions are well taken care of.
I was so concerned, and thank God I'm not traveling as much now. So he'll just be with me and not really interacting with other dogs for a while, or with dogs who we know are well. Basil came into our family in 2021, and he has just been the greatest addition to our family. He brings all of us joy and happiness.
This is Koopa. Yeah, hearing what's on the news regarding this new respiratory illness that dogs have. Even before this thing kind of came about, we never brought him into dog parks just because, you know, he's so little compared to the dogs that are there, and dogs are a very social animal. But yeah, I'm kind of glad that we made that decision. This guy, I mean, he's definitely a child of the family. My kids, my human kids, will joke that he's the favorite one, but they're not lying. He brings me so much happiness.
In Corpus Christi, Texas, I'm Jane Kathleen Gregorio, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Extraordinary stories from ThomasILikness today. From Ivory Coast first retirement home, to French beekeepers getting stung by imported honey, to Italy's first restaurant for dogs. All these and more on Correspondent at Large.
And now news and commentary from around the globe. Culture evolves. Culture changes. Well, sometimes. In Hong Kong, environmentalists say it's time to give the city's throwaway mentality a push. Hong Kong is swamped in trash. It has 13 dump sites that are full. The remaining 3 are expected to fill up by the end of the decade. Activists say a soon-to-be-implemented ban on various plastic products may not reduce waste. You see, they fear people will merely replace plastic waste with other materials. Campaigners are calling for a lifestyle change. They want people to reuse rather than throw away. Well, here's a cultural tradition that's not likely to change, at least anytime soon: caring for one's elderly relatives. In the West African nation of the Ivory Coast, a private company has opened the country's first retirement home. But it's anything but a roaring success. 2 months after it opened, it still sits empty. You see, here, the elderly traditionally rely on family members to look after them. Relatives take care of about 80% of the seniors. Neighbors look out for the rest. Nina Zugo, she's the director of the facility. Well, she admits deeply rooted values are keeping her home empty. She also says people fear being judged should they place their parents in a home. Cost is another factor. These people simply can't afford it. A one-day stay costs $60, and that's half the minimum monthly salary in the Ivory Coast. Zugo says she wants to avoid the problems that occur in Western retirement homes. She says she just wants to create a lively living space for the elderly. But it's not likely to catch on anytime soon. French beekeepers are feeling the sting of competition from imported honey, and they want the government to help them out with emergency aid. This past week, they staged a demonstration in Paris. Quiet, not like the usual rowdy protests. Instead, they lay on the ground and held what they call a die-in. One of their posters read, "Imported honey is killing us." Beekeepers say they have a surplus of honey that they can't sell because of cheap imports. They want the government to set a minimum entry price, quotas, and import controls. They also say they need an emergency aid plan so they can keep their hives buzzing. Well, the rest of this program is going to go to the dogs. We begin the Canine Chronicles with a yarn out of Rome, where Italy's first restaurant that caters to dogs has opened. Here at Fiuto, pampered pooches and their owners are shown to a table. The dogs have their own menu. They eat at the table with their owners. Some of the items: a boiled egg with pureed peas and fontina cheese. There's also chicken, beef, and fish entrees, all prepared by a chef. Because here at Fiyoto, dogs are kings and queens. And another dog tale: these two hounds, Rosie and Alba, well, they're artists. They, along with other abandoned strays, work out of a studio in Bristol, England. These dogs make the artistic creations as part of a unique fundraiser for the Bristol Animal Rescue Centre. They use their paws and snouts. Some of the more energetic ones walk on their canvases. Others will use their whole bodies to create their art. And here is a finished painting. With high inflation and soaring interest rates, people in the United Kingdom are abandoning pets they bought during the pandemic. Just can't afford to look after them. The rescue center is full and has financial challenges of its own. So, to raise money, it's holding an online mutt gala this month and auctioning off these canine creations. I'll be back in 7 days, and until then, I wish you all peace, joy, and happiness in the ensuing week. ThomasILikness, Correspondent at Large, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
In Canada, Toronto introduces a comprehensive strategy which provides recommendations to people based on their mental health-related needs. Yolanda Espiras on Health is Wealth.
One in 5 Canadians face mental health challenges, and 1 in 2 Canadians will experience mental illness by the time they are 40, according to the Mental Health Commission of Canada. Just less than half of adults and students in Toronto reported that their mental health is very good, with the other half reporting and feeling the opposite. 17% of Toronto youth reported contemplating suicide in the past year. An average of 4,500 people die by suicide annually across Canada, making it the second leading cause of death for Canadian men ages 15 to 39. 70% of Ontarians reported feeling lonely and wanting to experience meaningful interactions. There's also a reported increase in behavioral addictions like gambling and problematic internet use, with Ontario students in grades 7 to 12 using social media for 5 or more hours a day. About 800 deaths and almost 4,500 hospitalizations are related to alcohol abuse in Toronto on a yearly average. This week is regarded as National Addictions Awareness Week. In light of these, Toronto is introducing a new and comprehensive strategy called Our Health, Our City, which provides solutions and recommendations that serve people based on their mental health-related needs. Some of the actions in this strategy include interventions, community support, evidence-based and client-centered services, improving access to housing, and supporting mentally healthy workspaces. Yolanda Espiras, Toronto, Ontario, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
The first malaria vaccine recommended by the World Health Organization arrived at Cameroon's Yaoundé N'Tsamalin International Airport on Tuesday. This, as several African countries are now finalizing rollout plans for malaria vaccines to be introduced into routine immunization programs. Malesen Bulan tells us more.
What you see are UNICEF images showing a batch of over 330,000 doses of RTS-S, first malaria vaccine recommended by WHO. An additional 1.7 million doses are set for delivery to Burkina Faso, Liberia, Niger, and Sierra Leone in the coming weeks. Several African countries are finalizing preparations for malaria vaccines to be part of routine immunization programs. The first doses are set to be administered in January to March of next year. WHO says malaria burden is the highest on the African continent. It has accounted for approximately 95% of global malaria cases and 96% of related deaths in 2021. WHO Chief Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says the delivery of malaria vaccines to new countries across Africa will offer life-saving protection to millions of children at risk of the disease. Myla Simbulan, Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
A food safety alert is out as a number of Salmonella cases linked to cantaloupes has doubled across the country since November 17th. The outbreak has now affected 32 states. Rosel Feria reports.
Close to 100 Salmonella cases linked to cantaloupe have been reported across 32 states. 2 have died in Minnesota, 45 are in hospital. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warns not to eat any recalled cantaloupes and other fruit products. Wash items and surfaces thoroughly that may have touched the recalled fruit. Call your healthcare provider if you have Salmonella symptoms, which include diarrhea, fever, vomiting, and stomach cramps. Canada is also investigating this outbreak and has linked illness in Canada with the same Salmonella strain to cantaloupes. For a list of recalled food related to this outbreak, go to cdc.gov. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C. Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Meanwhile, Port Moresby hosts Papua New Guinea's second National Summit on Gender Equality and Women's Economic Empowerment. Here's Eka Ortaleza Quinola on Oceania at a Glance.
The second National Summit for Gender Equality and Women's Economic Empowerment is now happening at the APEC House, Port Moresby.
This summit is very important because this conversation and agenda must be brought to the mainstream, and we discuss it openly so we understand the context of it and the benefit of it so we can manifest it.
The two-day summit underscores sharing of expertise to empower political, civil society, and private sector leaders to take action in gender equality in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, firstly, women and girls of our country are equal citizens. They have the right to benefit from all the development resources, opportunities of our country. I believe that our country can, be much greater than it is now if women and girls and men and boys, we all work together in all space.
The summit aims to produce actions aimed at eliminating all forms of gender-based violence, sorcery accusation-related violence, and sexual violence in the family. United Nations Women Uganda representative Adekemi Nedeli says a collective resolve to address the root cause of violence is paramount.
Women and girls have been pushed back for too long. The issues that women and girls face are very complex, interconnected, and therefore it needs all of government, all of actors to drive change.
She says violence against women and girls is an affront to human dignity.
In Papua New Guinea in particular, the figures are alarming. This is a renewed drive to have us revitalize the advocacy, revitalize the drive, and make sure that we can bring about a change and transformation in the lives of women in Papua New Guinea.
A citywide campaign to promote gender equality is done through a Red Vember walk. Citizens and non-citizens residing at Port Moresby show support to the advocacy.
With this parliamentary committee that has been created, we have a whole new opportunity to make a change.
From Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, Eka Ortaleza Quinola, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
And before we let you go, here's our photo of the week. This is Shenandoah's fall foliage. This time of year is best if you want to see the colors of the leaves as they reach the last stage of their progression before eventually falling off. This national park is located just 75 miles from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Thank you, BN Angeles, for this shot. Thank you all for joining us again. If there are any stories or topics you want us to share with you, just comment below. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and X at Eagle News Live. I'm Ralph Cornell. We live in extraordinary times. Stay happy and healthy, everyone.